So hello everybody. This week I've been working on some Excel development, and within those developments I use something known as a dynamic named range. Now dynamic named ranges they're something I use all the time. I think they're really good, really useful, and the general idea is we have a named range defined in our workbook, and this named range will automatically adjust as you add or remove data from it. So as an example, we've got a spreadsheet here, and on the user input tab, we've got a drop-down list for the inputs for a given city, and it's got 3 cities on there at the moment. And we've got a separate tab called dynamic lists. Now in this tab, we have 2 named ranges defined. So if we click on our formulas name manager, we can see there's 2 of them defined in here. If we click on the cities table, and just go to that named range, we can see it's defined as these 3 cities here. We then close this down, and we're going to add a new city. We're going to add Los Angeles. And then what we'll notice when we go back to the name manager, we go to the cities table, we can see it's automatically adjusted so that the named range now includes Los Angeles. Okay? And then if we go back to the user input, we had a drop-down list for allowing the user to select a city. And now that we've added a new city to our list, we can see it automatically gets added to our drop-down list on the user input tab. So this is where we're aiming to get to. We're going to start with a completely blank spreadsheet, and we're going to slowly build it up until we've got our dynamic lists in there, our dynamic named ranges. And then we're going to add a little user input drop-down box. So here I've got a blank workbook. I'm going to start by calling this worksheet, let's just rename that, user input. And we're going to add a new worksheet, and we're going to call this one dynamic lists. Okay. And we're going to say, let's right align that, put it in italics, and we're going to have 2 named ranges in this workbook. And I always like to include the name of the named range as the actual column header. So we're going to use cities table, and we're going to create another one. We're going to call it cities populations. Okay, let's make them a little nicer to look at, and let's make them a little bigger. So in the cities table, we're just going to add 3 cities for now. It's just going to be a list of strings. And for the populations, I'm going to have a rough guess of the populations here. These are going to be numeric entries, not string-based entries. And we're going to use a slightly different technique for the city populations than we are for the cities table because of the different data type, and it's just to demonstrate a couple of different ways of achieving the same thing. So in here we're going to say 25 million, I'm going to say 15 million, I'm going to say 30 million. Okay. Okay, so this is our base data now. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually add the named ranges. And to do this, we click on the name of the named range in the column header. Then we go to Formulas, Name Manager. I'm going to click on New. And it'll automatically populate the Name Manager pop-up with the name of the named range from the column header. It's one of the reasons why I've chosen to put the column header as the name of the named range. The way we're going to make it dynamic is using this refers to box here. And we're going to make it dynamic using the offset function within Excel. So the offset function, it takes a reference cell as a starting point. It then takes a row and a column as an offset from this starting point to where the range actually starts. So we use the row and column entry to tell Excel where the top left cell is for our named range that we want to define. After we specify the top left cell, next we tell it a height and a width. Okay, so let's build that in now. We're going to use offset, and you can see it's already given us the dynamic lists C2 cell, which is the one that we selected up here, our column header. So this is going to be our reference cell. We want to go 1 row down and 0 rows to the right. The height of our dynamic named range, we're going to specify this using the COUNTA Excel function. And the COUNTA function, that counts the number of cells in a given range that are non-empty. We're going to use that on the whole column, column C, and then we're going to subtract 1 because we don't want to include the column header within our dynamic named range. So we're going to use, just move the cursor out the way there. So we're going to use COUNTA dynamic lists, and we're going to say column C -1, and the width of our dynamic named range is going to be 1 cell across. Okay, so we click on OK there. This creates a new name for our dynamic named range, and we can see the formula here in the refers to box. When we click on this button here, we can see that it selects these 3 cells here, which is exactly what we want. So now let's close that down, and I want to just try adding a new city to our list. Let's say Los Angeles, and I just want to see what happens when we add this. So we go back to the named manager, click on our named range that we want to test out, and we just click on this button here, and we can see it automatically adjusts so that it's exactly the right size. It's exactly the behavior that we're looking for. Okay, so that's the first technique that we can use, which is a combination of the offset function and the COUNTA function. And the COUNTA function is being defined across the whole column. So let's close that down. I'm just going to remove the Los Angeles city there. Next, we're going to do something similar, just in a slightly different way. And the reason we're doing it slightly differently is because we now have numeric data in our cities populations list. So again, we're going to select the column header, which is the named range that we're going to use. We're going to go to the name manager, click on new. Again, it automatically populates the name with the column header, which is exactly what we want. And it gives us the refers to cell as the reference cell. Again, the column header, that's exactly what we want. We're going to use the offset function again. So offset from the reference cell. Again, we want to go 1 cell down, 0 cells across. This time we're going to use the count function. And the difference between COUNTA and count function is the count function will tell us how many numeric entries are in a given range. So with the count function, we don't have to deduct 1 for the column header. So we're going to use count dynamic lists. Just make sure we can see that. And we're going to use column D. And in terms of our width, we're going to have a width of 1. And then we're just going to click OK. So if we click on cities populations in the name manager, click on this button to the bottom right of the refers to formula, and it highlights the exact range that we want it to highlight. Let's close that down, and again, let's just try adding a new one, say 15. Pretty small city, but never mind. And again, we can see it automatically adjusts to include that new entry. That's exactly the behavior that we're looking for. Okay, so we'll close that down. I'm going to remove this. And as a final step, I'm now going to show you how to include a drop-down list based on one of these dynamic named ranges. So let's go to the user input worksheet. And on the user input worksheet, I'm just going to have a select city column header. And to actually select this city, we're going to go to the data tab and we're going to use data validation. Click on data validation. We're going to allow for a list. And as the source of the list, we're going to use equals cities table. We're going to click on OK. And then when we click on OK, we get this nice drop-down list for users to click on, and that will show us all of the cities in our cities table named range, in our dynamic named range. We can select one of these, and then if we go back to our dynamic lists and add in Los Angeles, for example, we go back to the user input and we click on the drop down again, and this time we can see Los Angeles is now included in our drop down list. That's the exact behavior we're looking for, and that is how you build dynamic named ranges for your spreadsheets.